Welcome to GCA Unmuted, the podcast where we share the stories and strategies that show how Georgia Cyber Academy makes online learning work. Grades 3 through 5 are a turning point. Students are building independence, deepening skills, and learning how to manage expectations. But what does it take to set students up for success in a virtual classroom at this stage? That's what we're talking about today. I'm joined by Terrell McCullers, an elementary grades bands teacher here at GCA, specifically fifth grade math and science, who helps them build strong habits, confidence, and academic momentum in a virtual environment. We'll explore what strong instruction looks like in upper elementary online classrooms, how routines and relationships matter, and what helps students thrive during these foundational years. So, Terrell, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you. But to start off, can you share a story that you think really captures, what a strong start looks like for a student in these upper elementary grades three through five at GCA?
Yes, absolutely. So I can think of many examples, especially for students who have transitioned from the brick and mortar environment, the traditional environment, educational environment of a school to, here at GCA, which we're completely virtual, and it's two totally different modalities. And when students make that transition, it is very hard to make that transition for them because it is totally new for them. And so the students that I've seen start off very strong are the students who don't get bogged down by the stress from that transition, and they ask questions. And that's one of the things that always encourage my students to do is ask questions and have an inquiry on any of the things that they need or they're struggling in. And that's where I can step in to help them. But at the same time, it is my job to also guide them at the beginning when they do make that transition over of how they can be successful and how they can have a strong start. And so, one of the beauties about Georgia Cyber Academy is they already have um, uh, like a module of sorts that is set up for the students to give them guidance and direction on how to start off very strong. And I always have used that module that our tech team has created before, and they update it every year. They approve upon it every year to get those students who have transitioned into starting off strong here at GCA, and it has worked wonders for my students. It not only has that they've transitioned successfully, but they have been successful here at GCA as well. And so that's one of the things that I can share with that I have done in the past, and I've seen many students be successful here at GCA with is using that strong start module and referring to it constantly as a outline and a guidance for those students to be successful here.
No, that's a great point, especially, you're looking at the elementary grade bands, so the 3 through 5, but you specifically are in that fifth grade math and science capacity. But um, what challenges do you think, like when you think about that, students that are either just coming into the online model or even students who have been with us, in those primary grades, but then they come in. Can you think of like any specific challenges that those students are facing early on? Is it really tech challenges? Or is it usually the technology challenges, or is it something else?
So the students who enroll with us earlier from the primary grades and move up to the upper elementary with us, normally it's not tech issues. It's just those students usually struggle more with the pacing and the speed of things, and also the rigor from those primary grades to the upper elementary, because we do expect them to be more independent, and we do expect them to take more of a ownership of their education because we're trying to transition them and getting them ready for those middle grades and those higher grades as well. Because they're going to have to be a lot more independent when they get into those grade bands.
Mm.
And so, one of the things that we help with those students is with those issues. Now, students who do have tech issues are usually those students who are coming from, brick and mortar and have never been in a virtual education setting. So most of the time, we'll come across those students with both the pacing and then also the tech issues of side of things. But the beauty here of GCA is there is so much support on so many different levels and we have so many people that specialize on so many different things to help the students where they need to be. We have a wonderful tech support team who is always here and ready and available to help our students to overcome any tech issues that they have, whether it be software or hardware issues. And then we have also our awesome family engagement liaisons, because without them, and they are part of our team. So anytime I'm working with any students that have any type of issues, I always get the FEL involved because they can always help the students when I'm unable to help them at the time, whether I'm either at a meeting or I'm currently teaching a class. And so that has been very helpful with meeting the needs of the students who are struggling, whether it be, something organizationally, or it could be something with tech issues. They have been very helpful in that situation. And then, of course, attendance here at GCA is completely different from attendance here in a traditional brick and mortar school. So brick and mortar, you just show up and you're there. But here at GCA, it's a little bit different. And we have some amazing attendance specialists that specialize in helping the students and our parents, and legal guardians, truly understand what attendance looks like here at GCA compared to the traditional brick and mortar. And then we also have some wonderful counselors as well with helping with guidance on many of these same things as well. It's just, I love how GCA is structured to where it's not just the student and the teachers. The students gets more than just the teachers. They're getting their teachers, they're getting an FEL, an attendance specialist, an assigned counselor, and there's a team that is focused on that student to help that student be very successful. And GCA does it well. This is my fifth year that I've been, with GCA, and I've been so amazed at how a well-oiled machine GCA is. And really put together because yes, we're a different modality from a brick and mortar school, but because we are completely virtual, we're able to make those things happen a lot better than what a traditional school would do. And so, and we have a lot more assets for the students than a traditional brick and mortar school has. And so that's what I've seen the major difference between what sets GCA apart from not just traditional brick and mortar schools, but other virtual schools as well.
hmm No, and that's a great point, Terrell, about the mentioning like it's a team. It's not just the teacher and student, but these different pieces. So let me ask you this. But besides the team, are there any other like when you're like, okay, you got to get these priorities right when you're teaching students in the elementary grades. So when we say elementary grades at GCA, we mean grades 3 through 5. You right now are teaching fifth grade math and science. Uh, what are some of the priorities that you think about when you're like, I got to get these right when I'm teaching these students? What would you say?
Well, one is expectations. The first, 2 or 3 weeks of the school year, or even when a new student is joining us in the middle of the year, those 2 or 3 weeks are so crucial because I want to get those expectations across to them so they know what they need to do to be successful. And I remind them of those expectations on a consistent basis. I mean, just about every single day. We go over our expectations of how we can be successful, and having those clear cut expectations to those students help them to realize what they need to do to be successful. Now, of course, if there's areas that they're struggling in or they need help with meeting those expectations, and then I will differentiate for those students that need the assistance to meet those expectations. But it's a two-way street. They have to be able to to do it themselves as well. And but with the support that I've done in the past with students and also this year as well. Yeah, it's just been awesome. That's all I can say. It's just been awesome. So trying to make sure that we're, hitting those priorities. It just starts with those expectations. And just make sure they're clear cut and they're high expectations, but they're attainable expectations. Don't set them too high where they can't attain them. They have to be very attainable as well. So um, that's one of the things that I do with my students. Um,
Yeah.
be
No, and that's a
successful in
great
that.
that yeah, that's a great point, making sure that the expectations are set early on and making them attainable. That's a good insight. So how do you do that? How do you actually build routines, but then also how do you build those expectations to make sure that these students are actually going to take ownership of their learning? Because you said, hey, it's a two-way street, you can care all you can in the world, but they also have to as well. And so how do you actually build those expectations in this virtual classroom that you're teaching?
Well, you said it to where. Try, sorry, I lost my words for a second. Um, you have to set it into a way where, oh, what's the term I'm looking for? There has to be accountability.
Hmm.
You have some kind of accountability pieces to be put in place for them, for those priorities and expectations to be met. But again, it comes to, here's your expectations. How can you meet those expectations? And that is something that I explain to them at the beginning of every single class. When we open up class, that's one of the first things we go over. We go over what are our expectations, what are our learning goals, how can we attain those learning goals, and the steps to get there. So it's just constantly bringing them up, going over them, and that to me that's what's been successful as translates success within my classroom. Now, again, it can be different in other classrooms because every teacher is different, every classroom is different. But I know within my classroom, just going over those expectations and being organized with those expectations, and then having access to those expectations each and every time, that's been helpful. And so I always have my expectations with my learning goals and stuff like that at the beginning of the class. And I usually use some type of slides. And those slides are not just for me, they're for my students as well. So they have access to those slides. They can get access to those expectations even before the class begins. So they can review those expectations themselves before even jumping into my class, which has also been very helpful as well. And then bringing those same and just going back to those expectations when we come back to uh, the next class the next day, because I mean, they're there every day, and those expectations being visible on camera, because that is one of the ways to be present, participate in class, being engaged, and what does that participation look like? What does that engagement look like? And then, of course, one of the things that they are held accountable to for that is one of the things I show them, especially when we have our student learning conferences, which um, try to do as much as I can with my students to kind of say, hey, this is how you've been engaging in class. This is how you've been doing well as far as your engagement and participation, and just give them a grow and glow on it. And that's been very helpful with them realizing, oh, Mr. McCullers is really paying attention to all these different things. And, I try to reward them as much as I can with, them constantly meeting those expectations of being visible on camera, participating, showing, a certain level of engagement. And that's just one of the ways that
Sure.
I do within my own class.
Yeah. Constant reminders, starting with the slides, that makes a lot of sense. What strategies then, Terrell, do you use to help students stay engaged, even when the content becomes more challenging? Because you mentioned when students come up from primary to elementary, one of the biggest issues can be pacing. So, are there things that you have to do strategy wise to try and help students come engaged if things are more challenging or if things are just moving too fast or like to try and help students that become discouraged? What kind of strategies do you use?
So one of the things, a lot of times, a lot of students will shut down if they're having trouble learning something new, or learning something new may become difficult. And I make a safe place for my classroom for them to be able to fail. Failure is not a bad thing. And so that's, one thing in mathematics, there's multiple different avenues to solve a problem. And, when they're trying to work out a problem, there's going to be times that they fail, and that is okay. I remind them that failure is not a bad thing. Mistakes is not a bad thing. It is okay to have those mistakes happen in class because that is where, we're able to come together and say, okay, how can we learn from this mistake and improve upon it? No one is perfect. I'm definitely not perfect. And that's something that I have to remind them of that. No teacher here at GCA is perfect. No teacher in the world is perfect. We make mistakes as well. But what do you do when you do make those mistakes? That is the big key. And so that's one of the things I've, start really early at the beginning of the year with my students, that when you come to my class, it is okay to make a mistake. And what do you do when you do make those mistakes? It is your choice. Do you want to shut down and or do you want to learn from the mistake? How can we work together to overcome this mistake? And so for them to have that mindset, it's all based off of a mindset. Getting their mind set to where, oh, I made a mistake on this. That's okay. Mr. McCullers is going to help me work through it, and that's what I do. I don't leave them hanging. I don't leave them, there to dry. So that is a strategy that I use. Now, as far as like pacing, one of the things that has been really helpful for my students is giving them a weekly to-do list. And they have access to their weekly to-do list the week before they come into class. So it usually pops up on Friday. They can look at their weekly to-do list to kind of get a heads up. Okay, here's the graded assignments that I have for these different subject areas when they're due, and it's just clear, cut, and dry. And then just also providing easy access to it. And the students know that they can access all their stuff within our LMS, which is Canvas, but to have it more hyperlinked, and then instead of them having to go through the weeds of our modules to find their graded assignments, it's right there for them. So I always give them a weekly organized, not really like a schedule, but a to-do list of this is what we need to accomplish for math. This is what we need to accomplish for science. And that is in conjunction with my partner teacher who, will teach them the other subjects, social studies and ELA. So to give them a condensed weekly to-do list has been a really good strategy for them. And then just constant communication, and not with just the students, but their learning coaches as well, is always very helpful to see the success of these students. So being having constant communication with them during class, outside of class, whether it be through Canvas or phone calls to parents. And a phone call to a parent or a learning coach doesn't necessarily mean something negative. I always want to make those phone calls to those parents as well and say, hey, this is what I see great that Johnny is doing in my class. This is something that I see great that Evelyn is doing in my class, and giving them a heads up of why they're being successful, what's making them getting, sorry, I'm stumbling my words here. The communication doesn't have to be negative. Communication doesn't always have to be, this is what we see is going wrong. We also want to talk about what's going right, and how do we get to that right. So if there are any other areas that need to be fixed or helped with, they can kind of get an idea. Well, this is how I've been successful here. Let's see if we can take that same success and replicate it with, what we're having issues with. And so
Yeah.
that constant communication with the learning coaches and guardians is also very helpful. And then, like I said, it's a team effort. So anytime that I'm having any kind of communication with learning coaches about anything, I always give a heads up to the FEL. So they're in the know-how of, okay, so this student is either struggling in this or doing well in this. So when they make that communication, how they are able to help them on the FEL side of things, if that
Mm.
makes sense. So just having constant, clear communication through all the stakeholders that is for the need of the child, for the need of the student. That has been very helpful as a strategy within my classes and to see students be successful here at GCA.
No, and that's a great reminder to not just communicate if things are bad, but communicating when things are going well, because then the parents will just expect, well, I only hear from you when things aren't good, right? So that's a
Absolutely.
good for you, Tara, for doing that. Um, the other piece I was curious about, because you're you have younger learners, and so you are having to kind of transition from giving a lot of help to kind of helping them gain some independence in their learning, doing things on their own. How do you how do you navigate, how do you support students in that process of, you want to give them independence, but you also want them to stretch a little bit?
Yes. I'm always a big believer of giving them the pathway to what's right or the pathway to an answer, but not giving them the actual answer, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Um, I want the students to think and to think for themselves and at times to think critically. And so for them to be able to do that, I have to be able to have that conversation with them and also probe them with leveled questions based on the student's level to help them understand to navigate where they need to be to get the answer or do what's right or be successful in a certain area. So that is one of the things that I've been doing really well within my classes, and then also outside of the class. A lot of times I'll get an email from a student saying, "Hey, I'm struggling with this, or this is I don't understand this certain problem or question with on this certain assignment." And I always, you know, phrase the question, well, what exactly do you need to help with? What do
Hmm.
you struggle with? And then when they're telling me what that specific thing is, then I ask them another question, you know, that will help them think about, okay, what to help them lead to the parts that they may be missing to. You have to give them step by step. You have to give them some type of ladder, but you can't make them put their hands up or their feet up to pull themselves up. You just got to coach them and guide them to that. And so through that probing of questions and those conversations with my students, whether it be email during a class, a message through class, or something like that, that's always been very helpful and successful for my students. So that's one of the things that I've been able to do.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. Making sure you give enough support, but they have to take those first steps, or first movement in that ladder, like you said. Um, I know you mentioned earlier that something that sets GCA apart, you think, from traditional schools or other virtual schools, was how well GCA has a team, how it's not just you, teacher, and student, but there's a bunch of different pieces like the FELs or the tech team or the counseling team, what have you. Is there anything else, though, that you think other schools could learn, or maybe just specifically you could kind of piece something from that that you would want to deliver? But what do you think other schools could learn, whether it's virtual or brick and mortar, from how GCA approaches instruction for grades 3 through 5?
Well, not just 3 through 5, I also seen it in other grade bands as well. One of the things that GCA does well, regardless of who is in what position here at GCA, when a teacher, administrator, FEL, or anybody here at GCA hears of an issue or problem that a student may have, and that student is not under them, they're not even assigned to them or anything like that. they are on how can we help the student be successful. When we have a lot of minds on the same goal of how can we help to make our students successful, that is what GCA does well here. That is, I truly see that every single day here. Um, when we're having our collaboration and my team of other fifth grade math and science teachers are together and we're talking about, looking at student work, or we're talking about a certain student that is either struggling to, on something, and that teacher is not sure how to help that student, or they're struggling to help that student. We're there with them to give them guidance on how we can, what we think, through research-based strategies or what we've seen work in our classroom to help them out with that. And then not just other teachers, but we're having instructional coaches in there. We're having those from our CIA team, which is, our curriculum instruction and assessment group. We're having people who are over the entire department of math or the entire department of science, and they're there in there with those meetings with us, also assisting. And how can we help that, just one student or a group of students that are struggling with a certain standard or a certain skill? GCA does that well, and they truly use research-based strategies. They use data to inform their decision on instruction, to inform the decision on what's best to help the student or students. I've seen different forms in other schools, but GCA does it well, top notch.
Mm.
And when I say well-oiled machine, it is a well-oiled machine in that way. I kid you not. Every single time that we have some type of collaborative meeting and we're discussing students and the needs of students, I've never seen so much great collaboration on whether it be a whole class or a single student to work together to be able to, help that student out. So it is truly a team effort. It is truly a team effort here at GCA. And so GCA is an A plus in collaboration and teamwork when it comes to meeting the needs of students.
Mm.
Um, GCA doesn't do, I've never seen any other school do any, nothing. GCA does it the best. That's all I can
Mm.
say.
So, based off of that, are there specific routines then or structures that you use, whether you think about it like these different collaboration meetings or what have you, or the way the different teams work together, or just in general, are there routines or structures in place that you use that you think could be replicated? Like if these other places, or are they just GCA specific, or do you think these things could be replicated elsewhere?
Oh yeah, I think these things can be replicated elsewhere. You don't have to be in a virtual setting for to be, successful as GCA is. I think it just becomes, I have been to other schools and worked with other schools in the past where there is collaboration, but you can have collaboration and not be a team, if that makes sense. Um, People are there to collaborate because they have to collaborate, or there are some people out there that it's either their way or the highway, or they want to be very reserved on the things that they think or the things that they do. There are some people who don't like to share. And I think it's because on the leadership that they've had at those schools in the past, um, and leadership is very important on setting good expectations, not just for the students but for the staff as well, and also mindset. Um, and so if the buy-in is here compared to than what I see at any other place, and it starts from the leadership,
Mhm.
and then also how it trickles down to your instructional coaches and then your teachers as well. Um, it's
Mhm.
and just seeing teachers actually being supported.
Mhm.
I think that's what it really comes down to. What I see, how it translates well here, and how, it can be done in other schools. I think it just starts from the top and setting that tone and those expectations for your teachers, and then giving them a goal and a vision as well. And if the leader or the leadership team is not, you know, they may have a vision statement, but if they're not believing in that vision, if they're not actually chasing that vision, then you're going to see it. It's going to die there.
Sure. Yeah, it'll fizzle out. That's a great
Yeah,
point. That's
and
it. That.
I hope I'm making sense. That's where I see the difference between GCA and other schools that I've worked for, or even, you know, having family and friends that are also educators as well, and see, having those conversations with them, what's going on within their schools. Um, GCA just does it well because they actually chase their vision and they believe in their vision and their mission. And I don't know, the leadership here just does a really good job, you know, holding on to that and chasing that, and fighting for that. And it trickles down to, you know, to the teachers. And there's a lot of buy-in from teachers for what the leadership has going on. And so you just gotta have that buy-in, and then also supporting those teachers that are struggling, that want to buy it in, but may not know how to successfully do that. And so to me, it's just the leadership here at GCA that does that, that sets it apart.
Yeah, that's a great point. Making sure that the leadership, starting at the top, has buy-in and they create the culture and it goes
Hmm.
down because if they don't, then you can't expect the teachers to or the rest of the school to. So that's a good point. Making sure that these other schools elsewhere have strong leadership that can create buy-in, that's authentic and can create strong school culture.
And,
Uh,
and just the word that escaped my mind. If the leadership can set a really good, strong culture that is chasing after the same goal, the same vision, the same mission, then there's going to be cracks, there's going to be crevices, there's even going to be some valleys that will really mess up the culture of the school, and you failed them from the beginning. So GCA's leadership has done it so well compared to what I've seen some other schools do, and it just starts from the top.
mhm. Absolutely. Terrell, what would you say to someone who doubts or says flat out, virtual school can't work for elementary students? You can't do it. Grades 3 through 5, virtual school, that's impossible. You can't do it. What would you say to somebody who says that?
Come come visit my classroom. That's what I would say. Come visit my classroom.
Mhm.
Because I mean, even myself, I've had doubts, and I have been in virtual education as a student, and I have been, of course, virtual education as a teacher on different scales, whether it be just for like a hybrid, or like just for part of the way, but it can be done. It really can be done, um, and I know a lot of people would have some reservations about virtual education because their experiences, during the time of COVID, and how people were pushed into that. But there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. Just like with anything out there, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And GCA has been around a lot longer before, you know, people being pushed to do virtual education because of COVID.
Mhm.
And they have been really the guide for other virtual schools to do it right.
Mhm.
And now, are they perfect? No school's perfect. But what I can say about GCA is they strive to get better and better and better,
Mhm.
and they make the necessary changes to be better. Um, and it really can be done. I've seen it be successful in the elementary grade brand. I've seen it be successful in the primary. Even myself, I even thought, there's no way that, virtual education is really meant for students second or below. It can't happen. And I would say because of A, B, C, or D. But since I've joined GCA and see how even primary grade bands have done it and
Hmm.
how we do it here in elementary, it can be done.
Hmm.
It can be done. And there's so many success stories that GCA has of students who have been through the virtual education, even from kindergarten all the way through and graduate, and they are successful, out in the real world.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
there's some of your success right there.
Sure.
Um, and
Great point.
so I, there was a time where I thought that virtual education was meant for more, colleges and the higher education like that, and maybe high school. But ever since I joined GCA, I've changed my mind.
There you
Um,
go.
I mean that's really all I can tell you. That's
Hmm.
really all I can tell you because my master's in specialist degree is instructional technology, media, and design, and some of that is looking at virtual education as a modality. But all the studies that have been done, for the most part, is what does that look like in higher education and maybe high school? Not a lot of research has been done on that, as for middle school, let alone elementary and primary grades. And what little research is done, it's completely different from what GCA does it. And so when you're reading research and hearing the reading research, yay it works, nay it works for various and different reasons. Research is very limited to a certain point.
Hmm.
When you're reading and looking at that research is actually diving in and seeing who are being successful at the virtual education. Um, and like I said, it wasn't until I joined GCA until I was able to see it for myself.
Sure.
Um,
You
and what
experienced it.
was it a transition for me? Oh, absolutely. Um, just like a student transition from, you know, brick and mortar to virtual. It's the same thing for teachers. It's an adjustment and a big learning curve for us
Mm,
to make that same adjustment too, because like I said, two totally different modalities, totally different ways of delivering instruction,
sure.
and planning instruction,
Hmm.
and how we assess. I mean, you have to think differently, you have to plan differently, you have to teach a little bit different, but we're all trying to, just like brick and mortar schools, trying to get the same, we all have the same goals. We all have the same standards. And so can it happen for the virtual education side? Yes, it
Hmm.
can. Absolutely. I mean, I've seen some students that have come this school year, come from a brick and mortar school below grade level, um, mathematically, and, you know, from their diagnostic assessment from the beginning of the year, they're low a grade level or even two grade levels below, and just working hard with them to meet the needs that they need to fill the gaps that they had from where they were before, and pushing them to an attainable goal or even surpassing that. I have a lot of students this school year who were a grade below and now they're a grade above.
Wow.
And it's because of what we do here at GCA. And
Hmm.
it's not just my class, it's other classes as well.
Hmm.
Um, I, I'm not going to sit here and toot my own horn because I'm not the only great teacher here at GCA. There
Hmm.
are some super good teachers, actually, not some, a lot, many great teachers here at GCA that also have the same success stories just as I have.
Hmm.
Um, and to me, that's just another indicator that it works.
Hmm. Sure.
GCA works, virtual education works, kindergarten all the way through 12. And I mean, I don't know what else to say but but that, you
Yeah.
know?
You mentioned learning So, a lot of things you've learned over the course of teaching at GCA. So, leave us with this, Terrell. The last question would be, what's the biggest lesson or a lesson that you've learned about, supporting students, teaching students in these, elementary grade bands in this 3 to 5 grades at GCA, helping them succeed and do well in our virtual environment?
Um, Even though GCA is a well-oiled machine and it's pretty fast-paced, having patience and also having grace is very important. I mean, uh, I've had to do a lot of that comparatively from before, just because I had to rework myself to be a successful teacher here at GCA, and that's not a bad thing. Um, that's really not a bad thing. I mean, I've worked for actually three other school systems before GCA, and every time I've joined a different school system, I had to change me to help my students within that school to be successful. And one of the things that's helped me that I needed to change for me for my students here was a lot more patience and a lot more grace. Um, and so that is one of the things that I would say uh, as far as that. And then you I mentioned change for yourself. If you're going to be successful in anything, you can't always be the same. You can't be the same in everything that you do and be successful in everything. You have to make adjustments. You got to be you got to form. You got to be pretty. I guess the word fluid. I guess the word I'm trying to look for is for you to be successful.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm constantly have to do that, not every day, but week per week.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
I you know, we may have some routines that are the same. My structure of my class is the same, but my instruction is not always the same because if I did teach the same way to all the students every time, then some students are going to fall through the cracks, and then some students will not be successful as they need to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so having to be adaptable, I
Mm.
guess that's the term I'm looking for,
Sure.
adapt and change, and being okay to do that. Um, when I first started teaching, I wanted to teach one way and do things a certain way. And I learned pretty quickly it doesn't work that way. Um, and I have been successful here at GCA doing that, and I've seen a lot of other teachers here at GCA be successful doing that. And how I measure success is how they are able to move their students to go above and beyond what they're supposed to be, what their goals are,
Mm.
going beyond just teaching standards, going beyond just, learning itself. Yes, we're learning math, science, and social studies, but in ELA, but there's other things to learn out there for setting up these kids to become successful adults and citizens, not just within our country, but out into the world.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's so good. The patience and grace, and then remembering to adapt teaching. So, here's today's big idea. When students in grades 3 through 5 are given clear expectations, consistent support, and meaningful relationships, virtual classrooms become a powerful place to grow. Thanks again to Terrell McCullers for joining us and sharing his experience. If this episode gave you new insight into elementary instruction online, be sure to subscribe and join us next time on GCA Unmuted Voices of Virtual Education. Thanks, Terrell.
thank you.